Oh, good. I invited a
Well,
few. Hello
that's
to
good
everybody
because
I
I mean,
invited.
hopefully these are other folks in the doctoral program, so they'll have an idea of what the final defense is all about.
Yes.
So,
Yes. Somebody, I invited one person. I don't know if he's here yet. He's my cousin. And he says, "Really? It seems like you just started. In other words, it's gone fast." And I thought, not from my
uh,
shoes.
yeah, yeah, and I have told students in my doc classes, I said, I remember when I did my final defense and they said, "Congratulations, you passed." I felt like the whole weight of the world came off my shoulders.
I
And,
agree. I'm
and
just
then,
ready for all of this to be over. I think it's
yeah,
entering into a new phase.
oh, yeah. But the amazing thing is, when you get done with all this, it's kind of like, okay, so I've got all this free time. What am I supposed to be doing now? It's like, and
Like you should be reading something or researching something,
exactly, and it's been very
writing
different.
something.
Uh, I printed out all these, procedures and everything, and okay.
Okay, well, it is start time, and I want to welcome committee members as well as all our guests to this uh, culminating activity of several years of scholarly work by Kimberly Stokes. And this afternoon, we're going to listen to Kimberly defend her research. Um, And as such, I'm the designated committee chair. I'm Dr. Victor Salazar, and I'd like the other committee members, if you would take a moment to introduce yourself.
Well, I'm Doug Thompson. I'm the chair of the Department of History and Geography and a professor of Latin American history.
Thank you.
And I'm Chris Gerritsen. I'm the professor of educational leadership, and I am Kim's methodologist on the committee. And it's and I teach ed leadership, meaning that I teach folks how to become principals, building level principals. And
Great, thanks. Before we start, then, I'd like to have our guests go ahead and do a couple things. First, please mute all of your microphones. As well, would you please mute your video so that the rest of us can focus on Kim. As far as what we will do then, the committee will convene for just a few minutes for a short discussion. When we reconvene, we will give Kim the go-ahead to begin your presentation. Following the presentation, we'll begin a question and answer period. And at that time, the committee members will pose those questions, beginning with Dr. Thompson, followed by Dr. Gerritsen, and then myself. If any guests have any questions that they'd like to raise, I'd ask if you would write them into the chat box feature of the Zoom program, and they'll be reviewed and then presented to Kim at the appropriate time. Kim, do you have any questions?
No, I don't.
Okay. Then what I'd like to do is have you to relax for just a few minutes while Julia, if you would please, go ahead and activate the breakout session, and Drs. Thompson and Gerritsen will join me there.
Okay, so where do we find the breakout session? Oh,
I see and hear you, Chris. Oh.
I think they have gone into their breakout room. So it's just me and the participants. Well, thank you everybody for coming. I see most of you. I see Genevieve Haskins. That's one of my Georgia Virtual School students. Thanks so much for coming. I know you guys can't talk to me, but we can talk in the chat box. So let's see if I can do this to everyone. There we go. Hi, Jen. Thank you, Genevieve. She goes by Jen. Hi, Amber. Hi, Margie. I saw my grandma's here too. Hi, Ryan. Thank you. I saw that my grandma's here. I think she's actually the CSU there. I left my sister my computer to take over to my grandma. So, hey, Grandma. Hey, Randy. Hi, Dr. Reese. Yeah, I know you said you had to leave by 3 o'clock. Hey, Randy. Hey, Dennis. And hey, Rick. I think that might be Rick Matson. Yes. Hey, Rick. And I also see some classmates. I was talking with the other folks, Dr. Salazar.
Okay,
Hi, Dr. Brown.
great. Okay, well, Kim, is that how you want us to address you, Kim or Kimberly?
Kim's fine.
Okay, Kim, great. Well, at this point, we're going to give you the floor, and you'll take the time, as we discussed earlier, to launch into the discussion of your work.
Oh, Dr. Salazar, I think we are missing Dr. Thompson. I don't believe.
There he is.
There he is. Okay.
Great. Okay. All right. With that, I'll mute, and you can go ahead and begin.
Okay. I'll share my screen real quick. There we go. Hopefully you can still see me. So thank you. I just want to extend a thank you to Dr. Garrison, Dr. Salazar, and Dr. Thompson for being here today and allowing me to show my work. And also thank you for being with me throughout this whole journey, the last couple of years. I know that you've put in a lot of effort and work on my behalf, and I just want to say thank you. Starting off. So today what I want to talk to you about is my dissertation work, Connecting to History Through Service Learning, qualitative case study investigating student engagement in core history courses. So I want to start off by talking about the problem, the idea that I had for this dissertation topic. I am an adjunct instructor for U.S. history courses here at the university, and have been doing that for about 5 years now. And through my classes, I discovered a problem with teaching students and their perception of learning history in the classroom. During the 1990s, there was a Stanford University professor that polled about 1,500 people, asking them to pick a word that described their experience in learning in a history course, and the most frequently chosen word was boring. And so I was kind of experiencing that same attitude towards some of my students. Through my research, I found that this was because history is part of a liberal arts education, and liberal arts meaning taking a series of classes, learning for learning's sake. That some students feel like going through that matriculation for 2 years is learning for learning's sake and impractical and a waste of time. So history is part of most universities' core curriculum, the general education courses. The liberal arts classes are intended to provide a well-rounded education, which is needed to educate the citizens broadly. The traditional method for teaching history was a lecture, textbook coverage, and then just maybe a multiple choice test or something like that. And so knowing all of this, students were coming in with sort of a checkbox mentality. They were just there to get their history class over with so they could move on to learning about things that were more related to their major. And so the purpose of this study is to be able to inform the scholarship of teaching and learning in regard to history pedagogy. Higher education instructors hopefully focus on classroom activities that prepare students for future life experiences and career choices. Experiential learning activities expose students to real world situations, and so through these, hopefully students are engaged and improve student learning. And so the purpose of this study is to engage students in core history courses and to improve their learning. The theoretical framework by which this study was conducted was an experiential learning theory based on the works of John Dewey, who said learning is by doing in the early 20th century. He also said that experience is critical to the learning process. And this whole idea was expanded upon by David Kolb in the early 1980s through his reflective cycle, where he said that students would have a here and now experience, a concrete experience, and then move on to a reflective collection of data and observations of the experience, moving on to where the reflective data is analyzed and concluded as feedback, and then making some kind of behavior modification based on their reflections. And so in conducting this study, I used service learning and this whole reflective cycle to test whether my students were engaged. And so how this connects to my study is that this experiential framework is connecting with this problem of service learning, which is a strategy of experiential learning. And here I think I should pause and just explain what service learning is and what it is not. Service learning is not just a volunteer service that's tacked onto a class. It differs from community service in that service learning is integrated with the student's academic curriculum. And it provides a structure for students to be able to think and write and talk about their experience. Service learning can enhance what is being taught in the class, and also can extend what is being taught in the class into the community. And so for this project, during this study, students chose a service learning group based on their interests. And they reflected while they were experiencing going through their service learning experience to past historical events. And so there were two research questions that guided my study. The first was, how does self-identified alignment with service learning and course objectives impact student learning of U.S. history? And then the second was, how are student beliefs about learning U.S. history changed or different as a result of performing a service learning experience? The methodology to carry out this study first was a qualitative paradigm where I am looking at the impact of service learning on student engagement and learning, and also a case study designed. This study was done over a semester of during the fall 2019 over two groups of students in the two classes that I taught. It was a naturalistic setting where I where students were able to go and conduct their own experience in student learning. I didn't set up the setting. It allowed for flexibility in examining the different aspects of service learning experience, and this was instrumental in that the case study served as an instrument for studying particular issues related to history pedagogy and student engagement. And so here I have a visual design of my study where you see here are the case study participants, the students in the U.S. history course, engaging in their service learning, and also tying into the course objective and then reflecting. So here's that reflective cycle going on here. And these two instruments here, the student is telling me what they learned from doing the service learning project. But in this auto photography, where the student takes pictures of themselves engaging in the project, this is showing me what they learned. And so here you see that the student is learning and then making any kind of behavior modifications or decisions based on their experience. So the inclusion criteria for including participants, I had 11 study participants. They were representative of university students. In just a moment, I'll show you a detailed version of who these students are. They were all online students. I taught both of these history courses fully online. 15 students returned informed consent forms. 11 were able to be included in the study. To be included in the study, students only needed to be enrolled in one of the sections of my U.S. history course during the fall semester 2019. The only exclusion criteria was that students who were dual enrolled were not able to be a part of the study because they were not able to sign the informed consent form on their own. I want to talk a moment about the recruitment of the study participants. Because I was the researcher and the instructor of record, I served a dual role in this study, and so to avoid any type of bias, I had a recruiter come into my class and talk to the students about the study and about their voluntary participation in the study. The recruiter also kept the participant data secure, the names of the participants, the informed consents. That recruiter established a secured Google folder to keep the data from the participants. The recruiter communicated with the participants through a synchronous session that I held, where the recruiter was the only person talking to the students about the study. They also corresponded through email and sent out the informed consent forms. At the end of the semester, after grades were posted, the recruiter gave me, the researcher, the names of the study participants so I could go into the learning management system and collect the data for my study. So here is a matrix, a chart here of the different participants that were involved in the study. As soon as I got the names for the study, for the participants, I added a unique identifier to each participants, starting with the letter A. And then the corresponding number that you see here only indicates whether the student was a part of the first section of courses or the second section. And the reason I added this was because if I needed to go back and find more of the student's work, I would know which section to go to for that student. I also provided some demographic information that I got from the student information system. Because I was the instructor of record, I had access to this. I thought maybe if in the future, if the study is replicated, that this additional information may be of interest. The admission types of the students, most students were traditional, meaning that they were high school graduates and met the requirements for a GPA and did not need learning support. However, the limited admission type means that they have met the GPA requirements for admission to the university, but are also considered learning support. And then, of course, the dual high school enrollment means that the student is a high school student who is also taking classes at the college. So as you can see here, I also added the academic classification for each. This being a core course, mostly made up of freshmen and sophomores, although some juniors. And also I thought it might be interesting, maybe in a later study, to add the major of the students who participated. And so what you can see here are all of the students who returned informed consent forms to me. The 3 high school students, dual enrollment students that were excluded are listed here, as well as one of the students who would have been included, but they did not turn in the work for me to be able to take and look at. So next I want to talk to you a little bit about what this service learning project was. So what I did was I have a history class, and I took 3 of the units that were studied in history, and the course added 1 course objective from each of those units and asked students, based on their interest, which group they thought they would want to be a part of to perform a service learning or a community service volunteerism type project. For example, here the first group was called Culture Club. This is where we are looking at the different cultural influences that shape America. And so the course objective here is to analyze the components of American society today that includes elements of Native American, European, and African cultures. So a student who may be interested in working with a group of people who are different than themselves, maybe they want to design a flyer for the Hispanic Festival or be a part of an interfaith festival, they may choose to be a part of this group and find a community service that fits with this. The other unit here was civic responsibility. This is where we're learning about the Constitution. We're learning about what it means to be a responsible citizen. So students that may choose this group just want to make the community a better place. And then the third group was the reformers, a group of people that we study in the mid-19th century who looked at society and said, how can I make improvements on education and mental health? So students who may be interested in this group maybe will want to volunteer at a homeless shelter or maybe even a mental health facility. So at the beginning of the semester, I go over the project and ask students to choose one of these 3 groups to be a part of, to then go and create a volunteer experience for themselves. And so one of the first things the student turns into me is this form where they decide on their group, and then they research 3 potential organizations to which they may do a volunteer experience. And I have them list the group here and turn in the organizations to me. And the reason I do this is twofold. First, I want to make sure that the student understands what is expected of them and understands the project instructions and criteria. And I want the student to be able to run an idea by me of what they may want to do for volunteer experience to make sure that they are doing something that is in line with the project. So then the student goes and they perform their service learning, and as part of their service learning, they turn in 3 pieces of assignments to me to document and reflect on their experience, which make up my instrumentation. And the first one is the participant diaries. This is where the student documents their experience, just naming what their service learning is, their volunteer experience is. And here I also have some guiding questions for them to just start thinking about what they're doing with their experience and how this might relate to history. This document is written with the researcher in mind. I intentionally have students fill this out so I can take this information and make some kind of interpretation off of this. The next instrument here is the virtual discussion questions, which would be sort of like a focus group, where I relate each of these questions back to the research question. It also follows what's known as the ORID model, where there are each question falls into one of these categories, whether it's an objective question, reflective, interpretational, or decisional. And so I have 3 overarching questions that students answer in a discussion board, where the first is making a connection to U.S. history. Each one of these types of questions is supported by the research and linked back to the research question. The next group of questions speak to the impact of the experience on the student and their experience in while learning U.S. history. They're also linked back to the literature and are representative of the research questions. And then finally, I ask them a series of questions regarding their future after they complete their experience, what they plan to do, if anything, with the experience. And then the third instrumentation that I have is actually done while the student is performing their service learning project. I've asked that they take pictures or a short video of them actually engaging in their service learning. This is also developed by me, the researcher. Because I'm doing this is a qualitative paradigm, I'm writing a story about how this experience impacts students. And so research supports this type of data source. Hazelton in 2017 says photos allow people to see the viewpoint of people who've lived the lives rather than seeing them through the eyes of the researcher. So this is an important piece of my study in that students aren't telling me what their experience is, they're showing me what their experience is. So the study participants select the photographs and tell their own stories about what the photographs mean. And this gives them a voice to the different stories and identifies the issues and the themes that emerge. So the data collection was sequential and occurred in 3 phases, where the participant diaries, I was looking for the experience and I tell the students what it is I need. The autophotography, I'm looking for the signs of the realistic student experience, the engagement, and then the virtual discussion questions, where I'm looking, reading through and coding the themes and that allow for interpretation of the data and address the research questions. The trustworthiness of this data is through triangulation. The credibility of the data sources are established through this triangulation of data. Each data source has been selected as a means for answering the research question. And the triangulation asks the same research questions of different study participants and collects data from different sources through the different methods to which that are able to answer the same questions. Through this, I used an inductive coding process where for organizing the data. Through the first read, I looked for commonalities of statements and phrases. And then through the second read, I started color coding and coming up with general themes and sub-themes. And so these are the themes, the general themes, the 3 general themes that I initially came up with. This first being the students, because of this project, developed a sense of belonging. And I'll just pause and explain what I mean by a sense of belonging. The student, as I was reading through their work, they feel like they are in the right place. They have a feeling of being valued, and they feel like they're safe in their own identity. And you can see by the sample quote here, the student says here, "It dawned on me that I could do this as a professional career." That lends to the feeling of being in the right place. And so I saw this in occurrences of 23 in the data that I collected. The second general theme, the self-identified connection to U.S. history content. The students, by choosing their own group to conduct this service learning experience, students were self-identifying with a course objective with U.S. history. And you can see by this sample quote, the student is actually defining civic responsibility by listing what her interpretation of what that means to her. And then the third general theme here, that the students see the project as beneficial to their learning. As students reflected on their experience, they found purpose in the experience and in learning history. And it's evident here, for example, in this first sentence from this student where she says, the project was vastly needed in a history class. And I saw a lot of comments like that where students were appreciative that this project was assigned to them, and even though it was a little bit unusual to be doing something like this in a history class. So the data collection continued as I came up with sub-themes off of the general themes. From the sense of belonging, I found that students were making self-discoveries and having a transformative experience. And here I have a matrix that shows how often these occurrences happen as I reviewed the data. Under the connection to history, students felt like they were making a real-life connection and improving their self-efficacy or their confidence in learning history. And then under the general theme of the project is beneficial, students felt like they were solving real-world problems and being active and authentic in their learning. And so the results of this study under the sense of belonging, the data showed that students gained an intuitive understanding of their character, their needs. The self-discovery was evidenced in the comments that I was looking for that said things like, I learned, I recognized, I was shocked, it taught me. Those are the different types of comments I was looking for. And under transformative experience, I was looking for statements that showed change. For example, I made a difference. I have grown. I'm humbled by this experience. And also, the auto photography presentations provided evidence of a transformative experience through images depicting student engagement, such as a student right here. Also, being involved and interacting with the community here, and interaction with technology and social media. So all of the first results here make an impact on student learning and answer the first research question, which is how does self-identified alignment with service learning and course objectives impact service student learning on U.S. history. The next general theme, the connection to U.S. history. Data showed that students connected their real-life experiences with what they were learning in history. This connection activated their knowledge and improved their self-efficacy in learning history. Within the context of the virtual discussion questions, students were able to demonstrate that they connected their experience with the general concepts of civic responsibility and the actions of the reformers, and also the benefit of experiencing cultures different from their own. And with the third general theme and its sub-themes, students who find purpose in what they're learning increase their capacity to learn, and that's from the research, the Lit Review. Data reveals that students underwent volunteer experiences. They were able to encounter and sometimes play a role in solving real world problems. They identified their experiences as meaningful, significant. They had added comments like, I see the struggle, there were challenges. And so during these experiences, students were able to apply knowledge in real life contexts and situations as well. Students also describe their time spent performing service learning as beneficial to learning history. The authenticity of the experience allowed students to take ownership of their learning and identify connections to how they were learning and viewing history. And so the analysis of the findings for these general themes and sub-themes are supported by the research. Both Tran and Humphreys support this finding by speaking to the process of applying previous knowledge to new situations to discover new learning and using the newly learned skills that may serve to develop the characteristics in a person. Also, Paul explains that an experience is personally transformative if it changes a person's view, including core preferences. Also, the connection to U.S. history. Several of the data sources from this study, students indicate that they are motivated to learn by connecting what they're experiencing to what they're learning in the course. And this is also supported in the literature through Mergel, who describes this process as by asserting that learners construct their own knowledge from experience and that this learning is their interpretation of the world. Ma also expands this by surmising that the real world application in experiential learning experiences aids how students engage and self-regulate what they learn. And so students are motivated to learn about historical figures and ideas as they actively engage and take on these real life situations. Dotolo talks about taking control of one's learning. It shows confidence, promotes self-efficacy in learning history. As he says, this moves from a learner-centered activity to more of a learner-driven opportunity to learn more about themselves and also the challenges that they're addressing in society. And so the second research question is answered and supported by the literature as Donovan explains that the connection between the study of history and the focus of service learning by pointing out that just by the very nature of service learning focuses on real problems. For example, service learning is about poverty and homelessness and urban crises, all of which are at their very root historical problems. So the data from this study supports the conclusion that students through service learning will create situations in which they are not only actively learning about history but also solving real world problems. Also, the current and future problems that are shaped by history and learning about history is therefore essential to the work of service learning, and that supports what Woolfolk in 2001 says. So for history students, the authentic learning aspect of service learning adds to the relevance of that increased student motivation to learn history. And this is supported by Newman and Wallach in 1993, who assert that students are finding meaning when they are learning and the tasks are authentic. So the limitations of this study start off with the fact that as the researcher, I'm also the instructor of record for the course. This service learning project was required for a grade, so I don't really know if students were telling me or writing down answers because that's what they thought they wanted to hear. Some of the answers lacked depth. They were able to tell me they made a connection to history, but they weren't not really able to articulate what that connection was. Also, The online platform may have been a hindrance in getting some good feedback from students, but even with these limitations, the triangulation of the data addresses the validity of the 3 data sources and how the students are able to be influenced by answering the questions. So the recommendations for future research. If I were to do this study again, I would section off a time in class to not only discuss the feedback from the discussion questions, maybe in a synchronous session, or if I did it face to face, but also I would maybe create some type of mini lesson that made more of a connection towards what they were doing in the service learning or the different groups that students were a part of, the different course objectives they were learning. I didn't really give the students a lot of direction on making the connection from service learning and the course objectives they were learning because I wanted them to come to that on their own. But it might be a good idea in the future if I, like I said, did a mini lesson where I do help them make that connection. Another area that emerged out of all of this, which was surprising to me and I think maybe also to some students, was that I had a group of students who did not feel they had the time to come up with a service learning volunteer service. They didn't want to take the time to contact an organization and arrange for them to do some type of service learning or volunteerism. And so they asked me if they could do an alternate assignment. And the alternate assignment they wanted to do, they wanted to write a research paper. And so for this project, I was only asking for students to perform 5 hours of community service for this project. So I explained to them that a research paper would take a lot longer than 5 hours. And so to help them, I found some online volunteer opportunities and offered these to the entire class. And some of them really took to them. They were thankful that there are organizations such as the Smithsonian that gets collections of historical documents and asks that students transcribe or identify things in a photograph. So this was something that was new that came out of this. So it might be interesting in future research to only include online volunteer opportunities. And like I said, making the connection through a mini lesson, I think might be beneficial to students in any further research. Also, maybe making this study a mixed method study where, because in this study, it being qualitative, students only self-reported what they learned about their knowledge of history because of this service learning project. So it might be a good idea to add a quantitative piece and make this a mixed study, method study, where students could maybe take a test on what they actually know about one of the 3 groups, the reformers or the cultures, and then compare that to what they're saying they know. So the implications of this study for the field of education, history faculty are tasked with teaching concepts of good citizenry in a democratic society. History educators will benefit from using a service learning activity as in their courses. Service learning experiences provide students with real-world problems which are rooted in history, and Donovan says this, these problems are shaped by past events and experiences, so students are experiencing history when they are doing service learning. Using a service learning strategy shows that history instructors are in touch with the problems of the general citizenry. It links back to the purpose of this study to further higher education history pedagogy. This study also suggests that engaging history pedagogy is found in unusual places. Doing a service learning project in a history class is really not on the radar, but it works. And so that may be something that other history instructors want to explore. It is also a high impact practice, encouraging student motivation. Like I said, it is rooted in service learning is rooted in real world problems shaped by past events. So, in conclusion, I'll end as I pretty much started with John Dewey, who said that the true starting point of history is always some present situation with its problems. So, by implementing experiential learning, students who are learning about the complex problems that shape history can apply what they learn by involving themselves in real life problems through service learning and therefore allowing them to experience history.
Great, all
Questions?
right.
Sorry.
You go ahead and take a breath. Relax for just a moment. We're going to begin the question and answer period here. And as I mentioned at the outset, we'll start with Dr. Thompson, followed by Dr. Gerritsen, and then me. And for any of the guests who have a question regarding this research, I'd ask again that you use the chat feature in the program and allow me to read that and present it on your behalf. And with that, I'd ask Dr. Thompson to go ahead, please.
Hello.
Hey.
Hi, Kim. I'd like to ask a question or two about the subject of the connection to U.S. history, which you mentioned in your results. I wondered if you could give us a little more detail on that. For example, could you give us maybe one or two specific examples of how the historical content the students were learning was linked to the particular service learning opportunities that they would undertake?
Yes, thank you for that question. And I'll just go back to the slide. Like I said, I allowed students to choose their own group of interest for themselves. And in doing this, I did hold synchronous sessions each week with the students and go over a little piece of content. I didn't spend a lot of time explaining how or where they may make a connection to U.S. history other than just giving them this form and maybe answering some individual questions about what they were supposed to do. Most students chose the civic responsibility group because it was more like the catch-all. I think it made more sense. And traditionally, if a service learning experience is done in history courses, it's usually done because civic responsibility is trying to be taught. And so most students got this one more than the other two groups. But there were students who understood, for example, that the reformers were looking at society, and we talked a lot about the different types of reformers that improved education and improved mental health during the mid-19th century. And some of those specifically chose volunteer experiences that also helped were dealt with volunteering at mental health facilities. Some of them were online. There was one organization that uses a type of social media platform to allow people who feel like they need to talk to somebody in some type of counseling service to post messages, and then volunteers go and write encouraging words and whatnot. So through that practice of doing the experience, I think that students had a better understanding of what the reformers in the 1850s were trying to do when they looked at society and said, we have nothing in place for our mentally ill. Why don't we start try to get something going? And one of the quotes that I have here from one of the students, she pretty much said that, that this was something that, this was actually the platform that I was talking about. She felt good by being involved in this, and she understood more of what the reformers were trying to do because of that. I hope that answered your question.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And so the way, I guess, like this student's response here is an example of how you would, the material you had, I'm trying to get a better sense of how you were able to gauge the way students were making connections between these service activities and the particular historical content they were learning.
Mm-hmm.
So this is one example. I don't know if you have others or if there were other ways that you were able to kind of assess their making that connection.
Right. Their connection, the way I assessed their connection to U.S. history was at what they talked about in their answers to the questions that were asked. I feel like with their connection, they were relating it back to something that they were doing or could see today. Similar to what this student right here is saying, that her thoughts were open. Her idea of what it means to learn history kind of broadened her horizons. And by doing that, she's activating her knowledge and being a little more motivated to go back and learn more about how these problems, the roots of these problems, how they started, and then how they are still experiencing these same problems today. But to answer your question, how I know they made a connection to history was from what they told me in their discussion questions and through their participant diaries and in the photographs that they provided to me.
And last question. I don't think that there was a specific part of your study looking for a correlation between their assessment of this process and the grade they ended up earning. But that would be an interesting way to get another angle. And I wondered if you did notice any correlation between those who reflected positively on the experience and how that related to how they performed in class.
I didn't so much look at that. I do think if I were to replicate this study again, if I were to do something different with it, I would do two things. As I mentioned before, I would create a mini lesson explaining more about each of the groups and helping students make the connection between what was the historical concepts and what they might experience through a service learning project. And I would add that quantitative piece where I would ask them specific questions that assess the course objectives and find out if, through that they were actually making a true connection, or if this was just something that they were telling me that they made.
Okay. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Kim.
Hi.
It's my turn, I guess.
Okay.
First off, Kim, let me say congratulations on putting this presentation together.
Thank you.
And on the work. It's as you found out, this process is a lot of work, but I think you've done a good job with it.
Thank you.
I don't have very many questions. I want to kind of, me being that liberal arts person, in a way. My first question is, you talked about dissemination of this information. So what would your role be in the process of being the disseminator of the information? Or how do you see yourself as being part of that?
Well, I think this study, I would hope that this study would be looked at by history educators and taken as a suggestion that if they're currently teaching the traditional way history has been taught by the lecture method, that they incorporate some type of experiential learning strategy. Doesn't necessarily have to be service learning. That's just the strategy I chose. But I hope that they would see that this is something that is welcomed by students. One of the reasons why I've continued to do this project in my history classes for about 4 years now is because of the response that I get from students. They enjoy doing this and they like that it's part of a history class. They kind of want to make a connection to this. And I also want to stress that this project doesn't usually make a large part of their grade. It's just one of the things I do in teaching history. I also lecture to students. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, because if somebody's a good storyteller, it can be a very good thing. But I would hope that someone maybe would pick this up and think about maybe trying to use this as a way to maybe do something a little bit different in their history course.
Yeah. And so could you see yourself making making some sort of presentation at a conference to get across this information to other to other professors of U.S. history?
Yes, not only U.S. history, or history in general. I think this is showing that this is a way to incorporate service learning into a discipline specific course. So I think that also a professor of English might be interested in this. There may be some connections between English and service learning, or other disciplines such as math or biology. I would hope that somebody would just use this maybe as an example. I would also, I would like to put this in front of some history professors and just get some feedback on. Another interesting thing about this particular study was that it was done in a core course. Service learning is normally done in a graduate course with a smaller group of people, and it's very specific. Maybe there's already an identified problem in the community, and a small group of people are something is prearranged that they go and they solve that one problem. This was pretty wide open to course with a lot of non-history majors. And I pretty much let students decide on their own where they wanted to go with this. So it could be interesting to replicate the study and put a few more constraints on the service learning project as a whole.
Yes, I'm looking back over because I don't want to make a guffaw here, but I think, okay, so like what you just told me, did you put that in chapter 5?
I did discuss in chapter 5 who this was for. That is for not only history professors, but it being a discipline specific
Right.
strategy for service learning. Also, I would see that this is could be used by servant leadership professionals, as they are promoting servant leadership and service learning in academic classrooms. They can use this study as an example of service learning being in a discipline or in a course that's pretty much off the radar. They generally have service learning in healthcare. That's a very popular discipline that uses service learning, but this is a little bit off the radar. People normally don't think of service learning in history courses. So a servant learning professional could certainly use this study to promote servant leadership and service learning in academic classes.
Okay. And you kind of answered this question in your presentation that do you think that your more traditional students, the ones who are the freshmen and sophomores, feel more comfortable doing this type of project, since a lot of them are coming from a public Georgia high school background where they have to do the community service, so they see maybe some sort of connection between the two?
The number of students I have in each of my classes is pretty large, and a lot of them are already involved in some kind of organization that requires volunteer service. So a lot of students get it from the very beginning. It does challenge them a little bit to say, well, how does this link back to history? It helps them think about that. And that's one of the reasons why I chose the 3 units to create the groups that I did, was because I thought these 3 groups would be the easiest. There's one group that I normally do that's not on here, and it's called it's the political group, and it's usually best done during an election year, where I have lots of students who join that group, and then they go and they work for the different political parties or canvass for politicians. Yeah, students who are coming in from high school, some are on board with this. Some of the non-traditional students maybe need a little more explanation of this, and what's expected and why they're doing it, which is another reason why I hold the synchronous sessions and spend a lot of time explaining what the project is and where I'm trying to go with the project. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you. And I have a couple pages of notes I want to send to you. A lot of it is like grammatical type things.
Okay.
But my questions I've just asked you are more towards at the end of it. But good job, Kim. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Kim. Yeah, again, let me add my congratulations to a presentation done very well. But a couple of questions. Let me just start with just looking at your sample size,
Yes.
And wondering in that if you had a greater size, would you find any contrary findings? You know, those that would not find connections nor find value in that, and maybe can you address that, please?
Yes. Yes, I do. Luckily, the students that signed the informed consent and agreed to be a part of the study all were excited, I think, to be a part of the study and really wanted to give some good answers to help me. They understood the study. From doing this project, I always have students who their answer to some of the questions is, no, I don't understand why this is, why I'm doing this in a history class at all. I mean, that's just the truth of the whole matter. It doesn't happen a lot, though. Usually it's just a few students who can't make the connection. But yes, if I was able to use every student's work, the informed consent was not a part of this, and I could go and look at every student's work, yes, I think the outcome would probably have been different to some degree.
Okay, and in saying that, just for clarification, every student that takes your course must perform some service learning project. Is that correct?
It is correct. It's a required project of all students in the class, yes.
Okay, all right. And the second is, of your findings, would you describe your most surprising finding?
Well, I did. I talked a little bit about it. It was finding the online volunteer resources, and how students were excited to use those. It's really surprising. Just about anything that anybody is interested in, there's a volunteer resource available to them. And that works really well in a class like this that has a variety of different majors, as you can see just from the study participants, because this is a course made up of non-history majors. So if you offer up the online resources, if somebody is interested in environmental science and wants to track bird populations, there's an online volunteer service for that. If somebody, I mentioned the Smithsonian, at the time this project was going on, NASA had given the Smithsonian a collection of tapes from the late 60s where astronauts were talking to each other, and they just needed people to go in and listen to what the astronauts were saying and type that down. So, there was that opportunity. There's just for just about any discipline, there's some sort of online volunteerism that students can be a part of. So that was something that was surprising both for me and for some of the students. A lot of students abandoned what they had originally thought they were going to do and went to something online because it was more interesting for them. So,
Okay, great. All right, so at this time, I'm just going to ask the committee members once again if you have any follow-up questions.
Kim, I do have one follow-up question. I know that you, at one point in time when we talked, you had talked about the pictures and things that folks had submitted. Did you actually have anyone who submitted any video to you for this project?
I did. The video, one of the things a couple of the students did was organize a collection of items for maybe for the domestic women's shelter. And so one student submitted a video of them putting together the products in the little bags, and the helpers that she had working with her on that, and things like that. I mean, it just goes back to showing the engagement of students and how they are working to complete this project, and how they, are taking this project seriously, and it's motivating them to learn more about this, like I said before, this real world problem, and maybe even question, some of the roots of these problems, or how these problems either begin or why they still exist.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And Kim, we had a couple of questions from guests who actually were integrated into previous questions. And so with that, then the committee now is going to reconvene itself. So just hang in there for just a few more minutes.
Okay.
And then we'll be right back. So Julia, if you put us in a breakout room, if you would, please.
Wow. Can you guys hear me? I'm going to type say something in the chat box if you can hear me. Oh, thank you, Jen. Jen's one of my Georgia Virtual School students. Oh, hey, Wendy. Hey, Wendy. Whew. Y'all, I need a drink. Hey, Mom. Hey, Amber. Hey, Sabrina. I just feel like Oh, Dr. Brown, yes, you can have a copy of my syllabus and the assignment directions. Yes. Yeah, I just feel like I was a blah, 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 blah. Hey, Ula. And if you were to look at my notes, I don't know if this is going to come up backwards, but they say help. This is while I was being asked the questions. I have help. Can this be over? And then I have in big cap letters, please be over. Oh, great, Dr. Brown. I'd love to help with this. Hi, Susan. It's my aunt, Susan. Seriously, I'm just glad it's all over. And I hope it comes back favorable because I don't want to ever go through that again. Hi, Penny. Yes, I'll talk to you about the online volunteer opportunities. There's so many. And really, oh, tell Evan, Dr. Brown, that, yes. So yeah, these online volunteer opportunities are really, really cool. Like I said, whatever your interest is, there's something for you to be able to do. Like I said, you can track bird populations. You can make up care packages for soldiers. Let's see. There's stuff through the United Nations. You can sew support blankets if that's your thing. Oh, you can read ebooks. You can record ebooks. That could be cool. Like for English people, like English professors or English students. What else? You can do fundraisers. You can look at weather charts. These are for science people. There's something called Cyclone Center. You can look at satellite images of storms and help researchers. Not my thing, but you can record audiobooks. They have cameras set up in remote places, like in Africa, and you can watch meerkats and just record what they're doing. But the Smithsonian, I think they've got all the astronaut tapes done. Now what they have is a collection of photos where it's astronaut stuff, and you just sit there and you're like, okay, that's a helmet, and you type that in, and it's really cool. And that is history. It's putting them right there in the face of history. Black holes. I know that's from my sister Michelle. She's wanting to know if she can do something in space. I'm pretty sure you can. You can, okay, my Aunt Drucy says if you are trying to learn a language, you can be a volunteer transcriber on Duolingo. And, Duolingo is pretty good, as is Rosetta Stone, if you're trying to learn a new language. Somebody told me I was smart. Who was that? Oh, Drucy, my Aunt Drucy. Thank you, but it doesn't count. No, I'm just kidding. It counts. Oh, hey, Janiqua. Now I'm looking back through. Hey, Janiqua. This is a little weird. I'm the only one being able to talk. Oh, hi, Rick. Hope everything's good at Aflac. Oh, well, I don't know, y'all. Thank you, Rick. I appreciate that. But I tell you, I just kept thinking, how fast can I get this over with? I just wanted it to be over with. I don't know I think most of you know but I work for the Center of Online Learning here at Columbus State University. So we've been a little busy in the last couple of weeks. Just a little bit busy. The faculty have been really good, though. They've been really nice, and not that they were ever not nice, but they've been very just really good and nice and accommodating and appreciative, very appreciative. And situations like that, things could go sideways real quick, but they haven't. Oh, there's another there's an organization talking about the online volunteering. There's an organization called Be My Eyes, and literally you sign up, and what you do is when people need help reading things, like, they can't read something, you can go and read it for them. Isn't that cool? I think it's really cool. So I'm talking because the silence is deafening. The silence is deafening. Thank you, Janiqua. I think they're back.
All right, so Kim, as you know, we have two outcomes as a committee for a dissertation defense. One is a pass, and the other is not pass. But I can tell you that with great pride, we have all agreed that you have passed.
Well, that is good to know.
Congratulations, Dr. Stokes. And so, yes, take another deep breath. Now, let me just add, as most folks realize, while you have passed the defense and you are just about there, there's some administrative work that will be necessary to be accomplished, as well as having some additions to and clarifications of content in the dissertation itself. But we'll provide that to you in the next couple of days.
Okay.
And once you have met all those requirements according to the instructions in our handbook and the college, then you will have met all the requirements for passing. So the floor is yours. If you'd like to say anything, please go ahead.
I would like to thank my committee. I don't think I can say thank you enough for your efforts and your guidance and being with me throughout this whole journey. I don't think it's any, you don't get to a place like this by yourself by any means. And so my committee's put in a lot of work in reading my work and helping me along. But there are other people that have also helped me, my family, my mom, who's here, Lynn Hall, my sister, Michelle, my grandma, and then my friends, my classmates. I appreciate it. I really do. It's a huge sacrifice. There was lots of late nights of going to class and asking people to go to my house and let my dogs out because I wouldn't get home in time, that kind of thing. And it's, like I said, you don't get to a place like this by yourself and to be able to accomplish something like this all by yourself. So I thank you. And I thank my committee, and I'm going to be impossible to live with for the next few days. I just want everybody to know that I'm going to insist you call me doctor. I'm just kidding.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank
And at this point, the host, Julia, can go ahead and unmute microphones. And if Kim, you want to hear folks, those opportunities are there now.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Kim.
Thanks, Mom.
Love you.
Love you.
Congratulations, Dr. Kim.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Ola.
Can't wait for you, Dr. Kim. As soon as I see you next time. Love you.
Love you too.
Congratulations, Kim, from me and Grandma.
Hey, Grandma.
Congratulations, Dr. Stokes.
Thank you.
We love you.
Love you too.
Congratulations, Dr. Stokes.
Hi, Janifa.
Congratulations. This moment
Oh,
in.
look at that.
Yay. Yay.
That looks good. Forget that I gave up cakes for Lent. I don't care. Is it all mine? Thanks, y'all. Thank you very much. Yeah, it sounds good. It looks good too. Dr. Stokes.
You can change your name tag on your door now.
Yes.
Dr. Kim Stokes.
I'm going to change my email and all of that good stuff. Yes, thank you. Really, thank you. I very much know you don't get here alone. Hi, Valerie.
Hey.
Do you have the lovely Maddie with you?
I have her.
Hey, Maddie.
Hey. Do you want to wave? Congratulations. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Hey, Susan.
Hey, I'm so proud of you, Dr. Stokes.
Thank you.
Wish we could all get together and celebrate.
I know. This is going to have to be the best, though. Best we can do is Zoom.
I know. It'll happen.
It'll happen.
If anybody wants a piece of cake, they could come to Kim's house and I'll run it out to your car.
Thanks, Michelle.
Yes. Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
We'll see you at home, Kim.
Bye. Bye.
Bye, Kim.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See ya,
Bye-bye.
Kim.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Congrats.
Thank you. Thank you, Valerie.
Okay, Kim, I'm heading out myself.
Okay. Bye, Dr.
And
Salazar.
great job.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for coming. I really do appreciate it. I really appreciate it. Most everybody's gone. Good. No, not good, but I don't want to cut anybody off.
We're going to hang up, Kim.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, Grandma.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, and Kim, I'm going to give you my cell phone number
Okay.
on the notes I send you. So if you have any questions, just give me a call, okay?
Okay. Will do.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good one.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, Julia, I'm signing off. I'll come upstairs.